My name is Brooke, and on the day I turned 25, something happened that changed how I looked at my family forever. From the outside, the evening seemed perfect. My parents had arranged a small birthday dinner at home. The dining room looked beautiful, soft yellow lights glowing above the table, polished glasses shining beside neatly folded napkins, and a chocolate cake waiting patiently in the center. Anyone walking past the window would probably think it was a warm, happy family celebration. But the moment I stepped into the room, something felt wrong. You know that strange feeling in your chest when everything looks normal, yet your instincts whisper that something isn't right? I felt that the entire evening. Still, I ignored it. I adjusted my dress, smiled politely, and accepted hugs from my parents. They wished me happy birthday, but their smiles felt slightly forced, like actors delivering lines they had practiced too many times. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, families can be awkward sometimes. Then my older sister arrived. She came in late, just like she usually did, walking into the room with that confident energy that made it seem like she owned the space. Her heels clicked across the floor, and everyone's attention shifted toward her instantly. She hugged me quickly. Too quickly. The hug felt formal, almost like greeting a coworker rather than a sister. Her perfume was sharp and familiar, but her smile barely lasted a second before disappearing. Dinner began soon after. Plates clinked, glasses touched the table. My parents talked about work, neighbors, and random stories from their week. Oddly enough, no one talked about me, the birthday girl. I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to stay positive. I reminded myself that maybe this was just how my family showed affection, indirectly, awkwardly, imperfectly. But the strange tension around the table kept growing. Then suddenly, my sister cleared her throat. The conversation stopped. Not gradually, instantly. The room became so quiet that even the small flicker of the candles felt loud. She looked directly at me, not with anger, something colder than that, something prepared. And then, on my 25th birthday, in front of my parents, my sister said something that felt like a slap across the face. "We're embarrassed that you carry our last name." For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. My brain tried to twist the words into something softer, something less cruel. But then I looked at my mother. She slowly nodded, and my father stayed silent, but the expression on his face told me everything. This wasn't an impulsive comment. It was something they had already decided together. And suddenly, my birthday dinner didn't feel like a celebration anymore. It felt like a trial, and I was the one sitting in the defendant's chair. But what none of them expected was that someone else at the table had been watching quietly the entire time, someone who was about to change everything. And when she finally spoke, the entire room would fall silent. But the real shock wasn't what my sister said to me, it was what my grandmother said next. For a few seconds after my sister's words, nobody moved. Her sentence still echoed in my head. "We're embarrassed that you carry our last name." It didn't sound real. The dining room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had quietly moved closer to the table. I stared down at my wine glass, gripping the thin stem between my fingers as my heartbeat pounded louder and louder in my ears. I refused to look up, because if I looked at them, I might cry, and I would never give them that satisfaction. My sister leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms like someone who had just finished presenting a very logical argument. Her expression was calm, almost proud. She began explaining herself. She said my choices made the family look bad. She said people talked about me. She said reputation mattered. Every sentence felt carefully rehearsed, like she had practiced this speech before arriving tonight. Each word landed like a tiny blade, slow, precise, intentional. I wanted to argue. I wanted to ask her when love in our family became something conditional. When did a last name become a prize you had to earn by behaving exactly how others expected? But my throat tightened. Nothing came out. Around the table, my parents stayed quiet. My mother stared at the tablecloth, her lips pressed together as if she believed silence was the safest place to hide. My father looked uncomfortable, but he didn't stop her. That silence hurt more than anything my sister had said, because silence meant agreement. And suddenly, I realized something painful. At my own birthday dinner, I was completely alone. Or at least that's what I thought, until I noticed someone at the far end of the table, my grandmother. She had been sitting quietly the entire evening. Her hands were folded gently in front of her, her back was slightly curved with age, but her eyes were sharp, locked directly at my sister. There was something unusual in her expression, not anger, not confusion, something calmer, something older, like someone who had been watching a story unfold and had finally decided it was time to interrupt it. Slowly, she pushed her chair back. The legs scraped softly against the floor, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like thunder. Everyone turned toward her. My sister stiffened immediately. My mother looked nervous. Even my father straightened up in his seat. Grandma stood there quietly for a moment, and when she finally spoke, she only said 2 words. "Sit down." And somehow, those 2 quiet words carried more authority than anything else spoken that night. But what she said next would do something none of us expected. It wouldn't just defend me, it would expose the truth about everyone at that table. And my sister was about to lose control of the entire situation. The moment my grandmother spoke, my sister froze. It was almost strange to watch. This was the same woman who had just confidently lectured the entire table about reputation and family pride. But now her posture changed completely. For the first time that evening, she looked uncertain. Slowly, she lowered herself back into her chair. Her face had lost its color, and the silence that followed felt even heavier than before. But my grandmother didn't sit down. She stayed standing beside the table, her hands resting gently on the wooden surface as she looked at each of us. Then she spoke again. This time, her voice carried the calm strength of someone who had spent decades watching people repeat the same mistakes. "I've watched this family for a very long time," she said quietly. Her eyes moved toward my parents. "And lately, I've seen something troubling." No one interrupted, not even my sister. Grandma continued. She said she had watched pride slowly transform into cruelty. She said she had watched standards turn into weapons used against the very people they were supposed to protect. Then she asked my parents a question that made the entire room uncomfortable. When did appearances become more important than your own daughter? My mother immediately opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The confident nod she had given earlier now looked completely different. It didn't look proud anymore. It looked ashamed. My father finally spoke. He said he only wanted what was best for the family name, but that was when my grandmother smiled sadly. "A family name means nothing," she said softly, "if it's used to crush the people who carry it." Something shifted inside me when she said that. For years, I had felt this truth, but never dared to say it out loud, and now someone finally had. Then Grandma turned toward me, and what she said next completely changed the atmosphere in the room. She started telling stories, not dramatic ones, simple ones. She talked about how she helped me after my grandfather passed away, how she came over to fix small things around her house, how she listened to her stories when everyone else said they were too busy, how she carried groceries, repaired shelves, and sat with her during lonely evenings. I never thought those things mattered, but as she spoke, the entire room grew quiet. Because suddenly the picture my sister had painted about me didn't match reality anymore, and the person most uncomfortable with that truth was sitting right across the table from me. But my grandmother wasn't finished yet, because the final thing she said that night would completely change the balance of power in our family. As my grandmother continued speaking, something fascinating started happening at the table. The confidence slowly drained from my sister's face. Earlier, she had spoken like someone delivering the final judgment.
Now she looked like someone realizing the story she told wasn't holding up anymore. Grandma's voice stayed calm, but every sentence carried weight. She explained that real character isn't measured by public appearances. It's measured by how someone behaves when nobody's watching. Then she looked directly at my sister. Not angrily, just steadily. The daughter who lives honestly has nothing to be ashamed of, she said. Her gaze slowly moved toward my parents. But the people who tried to rewrite her value to protect their pride should think carefully about who they're judging. The silence in the room now felt different. Earlier, the silence had been filled with tension. Now it felt like realization. My sister forced out a small laugh, the kind of laugh people use when they want to make something uncomfortable disappear. "Oh, come on," she said nervously, but the laugh faded quickly, because